Okay, hello everybody. Let's get this show on the road. Thank you so much for joining us for the monthly ramp up presented to you by Franchise Ramp. My name is Nick Hansen and I'm the head of creative at Franchise Ramp, and I'm super excited for our second clients only webinar series that will include a mix of in the trenches knowledge and high level strategy, along with a featured interview with a high performing franchisee. Today, we're super excited to have Adam Gruen, high performing row house area developer, who will be interviewed by our franchisee success manager, Rachel Smith. You're also going to receive a marketing update from VP of Operations at Franchise Ramp, Aren Johnstone, and a tactical tools discussion with account manager, Eli Rivera. At the end of the session, there will be a brief Q&A, so please feel free as we go along to type questions into the chat function that you may have based on what we're learning as we go. We just want to say thank you so much for being a Franchise Ramp customer. The monthly ramp ups goal is to give you a coherent picture of what's happening at the intersection of marketing and franchising. We want this to be a tight-knit community for franchisees to share knowledge and gain insight. Our mission is to help franchisees realize their entrepreneurial dreams through targeted marketing strategies that maximize success for consumer-oriented franchises. Please come back and join us again soon. Without further ado, I would like to introduce account manager Eli Rivera, who's going to begin our tactical tools session.
Hey, thanks, Nick. Hey, everyone. My name is Eli Rivera. I'm an account manager here at Franchise Ramp. So I'm the guy in the back end who's clicking all the buttons, making sure that you guys are getting famous within your targeted age range and demographics. So today I'm just going to go over really letting your community know you exist and how to win in the long term while still getting results on the short term. So a few different points that we'll touch on, just the idea and concept of staying out of sight, out of mind. Just like you're going to stay in sight, you're staying in your potential prospects or customers' mind as well. And then also the perfect prospect that everyone chases. That can be across the industry. We'll get into that as well, regardless of brand or regardless of your industry. And then also the long-term branding and how short-term wins actually are going to win for you. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide here. And so the idea of staying out of sight, out of mind, in sight, in mind is you really want to stay relevant as much as possible. So really you want to have a valuable message that you're always sharing with your community. Now your community can be, if you have, say, like a tribe of online followers, that can be social media, or that can be in person. You always want to be giving some type or some form of a value. So that can be an offer, that can be tips and tricks, again, regardless of industry that you're in. And then also staying relevant by staying alive online. I'm sure you know by now, if you're not online, chances are your community does not know you exist. So you always want to be pushing something out there. And if you're not advertising, your competition is 100%, that should say really 110% of the time. And your competition isn't necessarily just people in your industry. So this goes across the board. If you're in fitness, it's not just gyms that are your competition. If you're a sandwich shop, it's not just sandwich shops that are your competition. And this kind of bleeds into the next slide here as well, that everyone is chasing this perfect prospect. And you really want to play like the big boys, but on a smaller level. So before I hop into that, really, everyone is going after that perfect, 30-year-old mother of two that lives, a mile to 2 miles down the street. And if you're in the fitness industry, for example, they're not the only, or your gym competition around the area isn't your only competition. You have the nail salon that's competing for them. You have now the elections competing for the mother that wants to vote different than the husband. You have, I don't know what else there is, tire shops competing for the same exact prospect. So really you want to think like the big dogs do in terms of demographics. And what that is essentially broadening up your targeting and your message for everyone. You look at Apple, for example, they have mastered the art of selling to the lower end demographics, or the lower income levels, I should say. Same thing with the higher end income levels. I saw something the other day where it says you can't tell if someone's either a hipster or someone who is walking around homeless. The only difference you can tell is if they're holding an iPhone in their hand. So they've perfected that idea of getting their product in front of everyone and in everyone's hand. And you really want to keep that same concept with your business. So the next part here, we're going to go into just really how to brand in the long term, and then we'll follow up with those short-term wins. So this little graph here that I put together, I took this from Facebook directly, so I'll share the link with you as well on this. And keep in mind, this doesn't directly apply just to fitness or just a sandwich shop. It's really across the board. And if this is something you're interested in, definitely work closely with your success manager, and we'll see if it's right for you. This is something we've tested just in general across the board. So if we look at this top section here, this top row where it says results driven only, that's saying that we're going after a specific target audience. So imagine this as that perfect mother, 30 and up, mother of two. And while it is targeted straight towards them, we may be affecting a higher percentage, but we're not getting a lot of people impacted. So where it says audience impacted, you can look at that as like a lead, for example. So you can see in this example, 1 out of 8. And if we look a little bit lower, where we're pushing a message out to a bigger demographic, we may be affecting only 8% in this example on the bottom, but we're still getting more leads. So now we're getting more leads, or more of a results-driven campaign. We're getting results back. And then also at the same time, we're getting your message in front of a lot more people as well. And that's the idea of branding, is staying insight in mind as much as possible. We'll go to the next slide here, and then I'll show you that kind of short-term winning example. So another graph here, you can see where it says reach optimize and action optimize. You can look at this as that results driven and results and branding driven as well. So in the example here, if you follow the graph here where it says reach, and we're looking at 5.2 million, given, it may not be that you have 5.2 million in your area. It may be, 100,000 people, for example. But when you start adding in the idea of branding and constantly getting in front of people, rather than constantly saying, hey, give me your information, I want you in my studio right away, but also playing that branding long-term and getting a message deeper, you're going to affect maybe a similar percentage in this example, just 4%, but of a lot more people. So it's that idea, do you want 10% of 100 people or 5% of 100,000 people, right? So playing the short term definitely is going to get you the results you're looking for. And then playing the long term is going to stay in front of as many people as possible and really make you a celebrity, in your targeted demographic. And here at the bottom right, you can see again, this is where you can do a little bit more due diligence or research on it. Just friendly reminder, work with your FSM, your success manager, to see if this is right for you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Eli. That was outstanding information. Please remember, if you have any questions pertaining to Eli's share, please feel free to message us in the chat. I would now like to introduce our franchisee success manager, Rachel Smith.
Thanks, Nick. This afternoon, I am joined by Adam, who owns Row House Santa Monica. So Adam has been an entrepreneur since his late teens. Prior to becoming part of the Row House Franchisee Network, he helped grow, a precious metal business from a startup to over $250 million in sales over a 10-year career. As a successful entrepreneur with a proven track record, Adam transitioned to the fitness industry with Row House in order to help people in his community improve both their physical and mental well-being. Adam, thank you so much for being on with us today. We really appreciate your time.
Happy to be here.
So I have a couple questions to ask you. My first one would be, could you tell us how long you've been in franchising and a little bit about how you got started?
Yeah, so I've been in franchising since, I signed my agreement with Row House in early February last year. And I got into it because I was just looking to transition out of my prior career, and I wanted to still stay in business for myself. After trying to come up with a business idea or talk about partnerships with various people within my network, I also decided to look at franchising. And I looked at a whole lot of them before I landed with Row House. But that's sort of the long and the short, what led me down this rabbit hole.
Awesome, thanks. What are some of the results that you've been seeing recently, and what do you think are some of the contributors to that success?
Well, my studio has been having pretty decent success with sales, especially considering the current environment.
Sure.
We've been doing everything outside, and there's just been a lot of interest in our studio. I think a lot of that has to do with people just needing a place to work out. right? They're tired of being home. They're working from home. They're stuck in their house, and maybe their gym is still closed. I think a lot of it does have to do with the way we conduct ourselves as a community. We have a lot of people who keep referring. Um, our marketing is done quite well. That's why I was happy to be on this call. I think you guys have definitely made a difference pretty much since I reopened.
Thank you. That's great.
I switched to you guys once, like right at my opening or reopening from COVID, and it was a night and day difference from the previous vendor I was working with.
Appreciate the insight. Is there a particular experience that you can draw from that has helped you make the decisions that you have in the recent few weeks or last few weeks?
Honestly, not really. Everything's been so interesting in that this whole environment's just constantly moving. It's the first time in my entire adult life that I've ever experienced, economic conditions like this. So, really, I guess just previous experiences and the current one I'm continuing to go through is just, taught me to move and shake and always anticipate change. You might not know what it is, but just be ready for some kind of change, and that you'll need to adapt to it, and likely quickly.
Very true. How else have you been able to foster a sense of community as a result of COVID?
So we've done that a lot with social media. I think we try to make our Instagram page really fun, and we try to encourage all of our members to follow it. And so it gives people another avenue with which they're communicating, right? So they're the people who always show up at the same class time together. And then they're also interacting with each other on Instagram. Sometimes we're posting, funny stuff. Other times we're posting celebratory stuff from classes. And also our coaches really try to encourage community. We try to have people, say hi to the person next to you. Go around celebrating. We can't high five right now, but we can still cheer. And that really seems to build a sense of community. And then one other thing we like to do is when we get new prospects in, we ideally like to sit them between two members that we know are huge fans of us, because they end up being really, really welcoming and talking about how exciting our environment is and what we offer. And that sets a tone for that prospect.
That's a really good idea. Do you have any advice that you would give to other franchisees just getting started?
Yeah. Always spend as much as you can on marketing, as long as you're getting an ROI. That's the only way to grow. It's like, that's why you and I ask you about our saturation level and how much can I add? Because if the lead quality is there, if the lead quantity is there, if you're not saturating your market, do not chintz on marketing. And then going back to what I was saying a moment ago, just be ready to adapt. None of us could have anticipated this pandemic. When March 15th rolled around, my studio closed. We literally remained like sitting on a spring to where we could open within a day or two once we were told that we could reopen our doors. So we actually did, I think, maybe 24 hours after LA County could reopen. And then when they made masks inside a requirement, we actually closed temporarily. And as soon as they said indoor operations are closed, we were actually the first in our market to open outside, and we did it the next day. So just move and adapt. We've always been trying to improve our outdoor experience. Every so often we find something new we need to buy to make it a better experience. And, we just keep trying to move and shake and just be ready to adapt.
Do you have a risk that you've had to take in order to, reach that next level of success in this business?
I got a big loan for Row House, so that's it's a financial risk, right? I'm sort of investing in myself and the brand, and that I have, every bit of confidence that I can get it to where I, always dreamed it could be. So, just always take risks on yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, no one will. So,
is there a reason that you chose Row House versus a different concept?
Yeah. My wife was actually the one who noticed Row House first. And originally I thought, it wasn't the right place in my life to do a passion project. I really am into fitness. She used to be a Cox back in college when she was at Michigan. And, so I didn't even look at it for a while I was looking at all these other franchises, and none of them was really striking a chord. And then I decided to, do a deeper dive and look at the economics, and what was presented did seem to make sense. So when I went to Discovery Day, I just simply fell in love with the workout and was like, if the economics were to make even the slightest bit of sense, I want to bring this thing to my community because I could enjoy doing it, and I really believe in it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam.
Sure.
Back to you, Nick.
Well, thank you so much, Adam and Rachel. We learned a ton there. Please remember to message us in the chat if you have any questions. Adam, I do have a quick question I'd just like to insert. What from the precious metals business, that you learned in that time has transferred as being an entrepreneur to where you're currently at? I have to know that before we move on.
Well, actually, that's a lot of where I got my, don't chintz on marketing belief from. That if we pulled back on marketing, if we ever budgeted ourselves based on how we were currently doing and not how we wanted to do, we would always end up feeling it because you end up kind of reeling in that budget over time. And so really that, and then also just never shy away from asking for the money. It doesn't matter if I'm trying to sell a gym membership, if I'm asking for a deal with a lender, something with a different vendor, trying to negotiate pricing. Just you have to be ready to have what oftentimes are considered, say, uncomfortable conversations, right? Just don't be afraid to approach money, and never chintz on that marketing. And those are two real big takeaways.
Awesome. Adam, thank you so much for being on with us today. And we are going to move on to Aren Johnstone, our VP of Operations at Franchise Ramp.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Just want to make sure you can hear me okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. All right. Well, first of all, I just want to thank everyone for being on today, and thank you for being Franchise Ramp customers. Adam, thanks for joining as well. This is a topic that really excites me. I like analyzing and trying to pay attention to marketing trends around the digital marketing world. And this specific one is going to be very top of mind over the next 3 months 2 months now as we approach election day. So we're going to discuss how the 2020 elections are going to impact digital advertising in general, and then more specifically you as a franchisee. So some just top level numbers that I think are very important and honestly quite astonishing are based on the reports that you'll read, whether from Wall Street Journal, Center for Response Politics, Kantar, large media companies, they're estimating somewhere between $7 and $10 billion in total advertising spend between the gubernatorial races, the presidential election races, on TV and digital in 2020. Another very interesting statistic, and this is the most unclear statistic so far, is that they're estimating roughly around 20% of that 7 to 10 billion is going to be spent on digital advertising, with somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 to 75% of that going directly to Facebook and Google. Now, the huge caveat here is that that 20% number is mostly based off of the 2016 election percentage on digital. However, in 2020, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the candidates can't travel around the country, they can't do rallies, speeches, etc. So no one really knows how it'll all play out and what percentage of their actual total advertising spend will go to digital. The predictions can be as high as 30 to 40%. So if we just take that 20% number of the 7 to 10, that means that 1.4 to 1.2 additional billion dollars will be spent on digital advertising in 2020 because of the election. Now, that is roughly about 2% of the total annual digital ad spend in the entire US. So that means all Black Friday marketing, all marketing from companies like Apple, Google, Tesla, whatever the giant companies are, all the way down to the digital advertising by your local, anything from your local plumber to your local AC to local gyms. So 2% on top is just a huge statistic by itself. So starting to get into what it means for local businesses and franchisees in particular. Nick, if you can go to the next slide, please. The marketing is going to be hyper geo focused. So this was the most interesting thing to me as we're really preparing our strategies for how to counter the election spend, is that of that $2 billion, a huge majority is going to be spent in just a few states. So it's really hard to get exactly how much of a market share digital spend is taken up for in any given state, but TV ad buys and the share of TV ad buys that are purchased is really easy. So they can use that as a prediction for how much competition might increase in any particular market. And so there are, just for example, one of the reports by Kantar, which we will actually distribute following this webinar in 5 states. So they took 15 markets from just Florida, Indiana, Iowa, Nevada, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. Sorry, 6. In the primary or the peak 2 weeks before the election, the political ad buys averaged 48% of all TV ad time. So if you think about that in those 15 areas, so like let's take West Palm Beach as one of those examples, 50% of all available commercial space on TV in that market was taken up by political advertising. And there's no way to think that the political advertising competition is not going to match that on the digital platforms. And so before we go into kind of how we're starting to strategize and change our marketing efforts around that, I'm important to explain how this actually affects marketing in general. So on social platforms, so Facebook, Instagram, et cetera, you are actually billed on what's called a CPM model. So you're paying Facebook to show your ads. You're paying for impressions. And CPM means the cost for 1,000 impressions. And just like if you're at an auction and someone says, you know, here's a statue or something that you're bidding on, Facebook is also auctioning off space. So they have the news feed. You have different spots in the news feed in a given market. So we'll take West Palm Beach again. Only so many people are actually in that area. And at any given time, only so many people are actually on Facebook scrolling. And they're only scrolling so far. And so if Facebook can put an ad every 3 to 5 images, there's a limited or a finite number of ad spaces. And so if we say we're willing to pay X amount for that impression, and then the political campaigns happen, and they say we're willing to spend 50% more, what happens is you then have to match that advertising cost or that bidding cost to get impressions at all. So CPM is truly just based off of an auctioning system, and it's really just supply and demand for limited ad space. And that being said, we're going to talk about what this actually means to you as a franchisee. So I think it's very important to understand the political climate in your specific state, in your specific market. You should understand if you're a swing state, if you're what they call the steady states. So like Oklahoma, for example, is always going to be red. California is mostly going to be, or pretty much every time going to be blue. And so if you understand the political climate, then you can strategize with your success manager here at Franchise Ramp to potentially implement some of the strategies like EJ is talking about. So that originated out of trying to fight increased CPM costs, get in front of people outside of that 30+ age range. To kind of bring it back to EJ's speech, the political advertisers are going for that 30, you know, with 2 kids, has a house, college degree. They're going for that same perfect prospect as well. And then also just expect week-to-week fluctuations on result costs. While I was digging through this, the fluctuation or the spend does fluctuate very drastically from week to week in individual territories. And so they're doing that because they have a lot of data to say that this is where people make decisions in each market. It can be corresponded with travel from presidential candidates or from gubernatorial candidates. So if you have a bad week, it doesn't mean that it's always going to be bad. It could just be that someone is spending an extra $1 million in your market. And then lastly, I think it's very important that you work with your Franchise Ramp Success Manager to employ some of the new strategies that we have been testing. So EJ was saying that the CPM cost, so the cost per impression, is drastically cheaper if you're not necessarily telling Facebook, I only want leads. And so we can actually, as advertisers, tell Facebook what we want to get out of the campaign. 99% of the time we say we want leads. What that tells Facebook is we want that perfect prospect all the time. But in this scenario, if you can't compete on CPM cost, there are alternative strategies where we can say, hey, Facebook, we want just impressions in our target demographic. So what it might do is instead of showing people on just the news feed, like desktop news feed, it could show it on the right-hand column or Instagram stories or Facebook stories, some of the less competitive placements where those political advertisers are not increasing the bid costs as much. And so this allows you as advertisers to stay in front of your perfect prospects, keeping front of mind without asking them necessarily, hey, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. And so there are workarounds that we're currently working through and testing to try to fight this volatile CPM cost and fluctuating competition in individual markets. We're going to continue as a company to really keep on top of this and try to understand trends in individual states and communicate that back to you guys. And again, I'm going to publish in our next newsletter, we're going to publish all of these resources where I did a lot of the research for this and some of the strategies that we're implementing to possibly keep down your CPM costs if your market is heavily affected. Thank you. Nick, you can take it away.
Thank you, Aaron. That was very illuminating. Please let us know in the chat if you have any questions. I'm going to jump in there and check out if we have any. Eli, you had talked about being famous within the market. What exactly do you mean by that? Is that connected to omnipresence?
I think that really complements what Aaron mentioned near the end of his presentation as well, that not necessarily being always in the feed, for example, just showing up as much as possible, and the idea of staying insight in mind. So, everyone in your targeted area, if we're doing like 3 miles around your area, or you're choosing to target specific zip codes, you really want to make sure everyone there knows you exist, for one. And 2, they know what message you're pushing all the time. If you guys are open, if you are closed because there's another pandemic or whatever it is. But really everyone in your targeted area should know that you exist in your community.
Awesome. And how has that reach strategy been working so far?
Yeah, so we've tested it across just different accounts. And so far, I would say maybe 95, 99% of the time, it's worked super well as far as short-term results. Long-term, if you start adding in those reach campaigns, you're going to be able to get in front of 1,000 people for, say, $2 to $3, as compared to if you're just trying to get results. That number is going to be a lot higher to get in front of 1,000 people.
Awesome. Thank you. We've got one for Aaron. Would you ever recommend stopping advertising in October to avoid the pitfalls of election advertising?
I don't think that you should stop advertising. I think that you can just be flexible in the way that you advertise. There's always value in impressions. And like Adam said, spend as much money as you can as long as there's a positive ROI. So I would say try to really dive into the numbers and always understand your business. You can't manage what you can't measure. So understand basically the return on your investment, and you potentially change the strategy or the messaging to accommodate. But I wouldn't stop advertising.
Awesome. Do we still have Adam on the line? Question for Adam.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, Adam, as a multi-unit franchisee owner, are all of your locations currently open, or are you in different stages, and has that been an issue?
We actually, we've only opened up Santa Monica, just the way development took. And then with COVID, we haven't even started. Our other 2 territories would be really close though. So they're Culver City and Marina Del Rey. So they would be in the same phase as us, were they already functional studios. And right now we're just, operations are outside. Somewhere in the next probably week and a half or 2 weeks, we're supposed to find out if we can move to 10% capacity inside. At that point, we'll probably remain fully outside, because that would only allow class sizes of like 4 to 6 after you need a coach and front desk, because they count that into the capacity. Once we can get to 25 inside, then we'll probably do split, part inside and part outside, or either just be fully back inside.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Last chance. Going once, going twice. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We already can't wait to see you next time, and we look forward to working with you to achieve your entrepreneurial dreams.